Hello, Renee.
Good morning, Mr. Flynn.
It is morning.
Hey, Jason,
Hey, Laura.
are you all set?
Set enough.
Okay,
Hold on, I'm
I'll
pulling
be
up
in
the.
I'll be in the background if you need me, but
Okay.
I know you probably know more than I do. So,
Oh no, like I hadn't been through the Ignite 2.0 stuff yet, so I went over it yesterday.
okay, great. But I mean, you know how to use Zoom.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Awesome.
Just hit share screen and see what happens.
Okay. I've actually been
It's
having fun with
basically-
it. I've used the whiteboard I have
Yeah.
a touch screen, so I have my little stylus and I've used the whiteboard to
I haven't
do some
done any
stuff.
of that yet.
Yeah. Let's see. I used it. Well, I've used it to talk about database stuff. I used it to talk about some of the Jason Abrams stuff that we've been doing. So it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
His little diagram of the
Yeah.
like
Yep.
a little every 7 years diagram.
Yep. The law of emotional proximity.
Yeah. Which I think that's been one of kind of the biggest key points lately is that, that it's like top of mind isn't enough. And so you have to be in close emotional proximity as well. Thought that's a pretty interesting thing.
Yeah. Hey, how much have you heard about bold pivot?
Only a little.
Okay, maybe if you have a chance, just put it in people's minds today, because
Yeah.
I was just on a coaching call this morning at 7 and I got more detail. So we're going to definitely be advertising it more and more next week. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's almost like you don't know what to expect. So
well, there, if you go to mapscoaching.com, there's more info on it, and that's where you sign up.
And when you register, they actually outline everything that's going to be covered day by day, which you don't have when you go in generally and look at the information.
Oh, cool. You already registered, Renee? Good girl. Okay, awesome. Well, that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it like for $99. Like,
Yeah.
what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Literally
Exactly.
$99, I guess, but that's it. Like,
Plus, they said that they think this is going to be extended.
Yeah.
So
What are we going to be doing?
yeah.
might as well be working on our business.
It'll be interesting to see how bold pivot adapts to, like, as they, like get through this one. And then if they do another one after that, it's kind of like, we'll see, because to me, the biggest part about bold is like the group accountability, which you kind of lose in that, but there might be a way to still implement it.
Yeah. They talked about that this morning on the coaching call I was on, that they're calling it bold pivot for a reason, because it's not the same.
It's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I saw people on the more negative side of things talking about it, and they're like, well, I won't wait to see who the coach is. Like, okay, if they're going to have, Eric said they already have like 10,000 registrations.
They're actually going to have a different coach. There's going to be there's a ton of bold coaches that are going to be doing it. So,
and it's not like they're going to choose the guy that just got bold certified a week ago.
Right. No, they're
like they have this crazy arsenal of people.
Yeah. They're sharing it.
And when people get stuck in that mindset too of, oh, I'm only going to do it depending on who the coach is, like some of my favorite coaches in bold are not the big names. Like
there you
everyone
go.
like wants Cody Gibson, and he wasn't my favorite bold coach of all the ones I've had.
Yeah. It's people hit you differently. Different people hit different people differently.
Yeah.
Now, have they talked about what's going to, the thing that's kind of an unknown for me is the coaching that they're going to have every other day. Is that?
So for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about bold pivot that's going to happen in May. There's going to be the coaching on the Zoom is going to be Tuesday, Thursday from 11 to 1. And then Wednesday, Friday is going to be coaching hour or 2 hours where you can go in and ask questions. And then on top of that, they're going to have a Bold Pivot Facebook group that they're going to have a coach available from like, it's like 8 to 9 or something like that. It's like all day long. There's going to be different coaches taking shifts and available to you to answer questions in the Facebook group every day. So they're trying to give you as much support as possible.
Good morning.
That's really
All right.
like I like what we're doing with everything. You know,
Yeah.
it's like so like instantaneously different, you know.
Yep. Oh, and
Which is
one
what we
more
need.
thing I also learned was that they're going to slow down on the KW Connect classes in May because they want to move all the focus to Bold Pivot. So there's going to be less Connect classes. So, okay, Jason, I will let you take it over. I'll be here in the background. If you would please start by introducing yourself and give people a little bit about your history. And you've already got 14 people on here. So thank you so much.
Who are you,
Okay.
Jason?
Hi, Jordan. That's not a Nordstrom's background. That
Yes,
you
it
got there.
is. Yes,
Is
it
it?
is.
I was gonna say it might be. I see the name was right there.
So in 2018 for my birthday, they launched the men's store. This is the men's store, so I got to go to it for my birthday.
They launched it for you on your birthday.
I think so.
Wait, is there a reason for the Nordstrom? I'm confused.
He
It's
likes
the best
clothes.
place ever.
Okay, all right, fair. I just didn't know if it was a past job or
It's the closest I
you
can
like
get
the
right now.
sales.
It's the closest he can get in quarantine. So let me figure out how to do that. Actually, we won't start that yet. All right. So I'm Jason Flynn. I'm out of the Santa Cruz Market Center. I like teaching Ignite. That's all. So let's see. I'm trying to see if there's a way to see like more people, but I don't think there is.
That is not all. You have a lot more history.
I know.
than
I'm
that
joking.
you can share.
There's more coming. Hold on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm still getting set up, so I wasn't ready for this. And so I started. Actually, let's start with why I wanted to teach like this specific Ignite. So session 5 is set goals that matter. So I started in real estate in 2016 up in Sacramento. So I'm not one of those people that's like, I've been through a shift before. I know what this is like. I'm like the other 80% of agents that I've never gone through this. This is crazy. I started in 2016, which things were in Sacramento still like on a skyrocket. And then in about this time last year, so about a year ago, picked everything up in business and moved back home to Santa Cruz. So I'm essentially, if a lot of you are new agents, I'm in a way right there with you right now. Like I've maybe done a little more up in Sacramento because I had a really good 3 years there, but I'm right back to square one of building a business and remembering what it's like to have to start at the beginning. And it's exciting. For about 8 months in Sacramento at one of the offices, I was a productivity coach for new agents. So I'd be sitting there telling them all the same things we know, you know, how many contacts are you making? Who are you talking to? What's your database look like? And then to get out of that, going right back to starting at square one of building a business, it's interesting to see it back on that side again, because it's not easy. If you haven't figured it out, this business isn't as easy as we like to believe on TV. And so, but out of all that, there's so many things I got out of Ignite when I was a new agent. So I actually took Ignite before I was licensed. If you remember how long it takes with a DRE to get your license approved to actually, you know, go through the testing process, it took me like 8 weeks. And in that time that I was sitting there waiting on the DRE, I went to a KW office and they said, hey, you know, you can take Ignite. It's free. Try it out. And I got licensed the week after I graduated from Ignite. And so that definitely ignited my career. And, you know, so that way I had this game book on day one of like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And it led to closing 26 transactions in my first year. And when we're in a Bay Area market, a high volume market. Everyone's, oh, I could never do 26 units. And I definitely, in my first year, like I definitely understand that mindset, and it's entirely possible still. It is a little bit harder in the Bay Area, assuming everyone here is either from Santa Cruz, Gateway, or Campbell, most likely. It is a little bit harder. And at the same time, we can't limit our goals down to, oh, well, I bet I can only do 6 deals in a year. And we'll talk about why setting too small of a goal might actually hurt you more than setting too big of a goal. So let me figure out how to get this going, and then we will start. Oh, man. Oh, no, I broke it. Hold on. Let's see, share screen. All right. Can everyone see the Ignite slide?
Yes.
Okay. I guess it doesn't matter if everyone can. I mean, can any one person see it? Well, let me click a couple things. All right. I'm very big on this is like an interactive thing. So if you have questions along the way, pop in. You can drop questions into the chat. I try to keep an eye on it. But don't be afraid to just unmute your mic and jump in and ask questions. I'm more than it's something I'm discovering in teaching Zooms is when you're sitting in a classroom, you know, talking, it's so easy for people to just like throw out a quick comment and it creates energy in the room. And that's a lot harder on Zoom. So I'm all about that. At the same time, if you're going to end up taking a call or your alarm's going off on your phone or something, just hit mute on your mic, because otherwise everyone else has to listen to your call, and that can be embarrassing for you, not for us. It'll be entertaining. All right, so let's see. All right, so first, does anyone know what the secret to success is in real estate?
Lead generation.
Kind of. So I heard lead generation, everyone else is hiding. Like, yes, lead generation is like a massive part of it, but the real secret is that there is no secret. And it's very easy for us being newer agents, but I mean, even experienced agents, it's very easy to get set into, oh, this is going to be easy. You see how many people know an experienced agent in their office, and that agent says, I don't even lead generate. All I do is I sit here and like my friends and family call me, and I'm a completely referral based business. I don't need to do lead generation. Like, do we all know somebody in our office that says that and does that? And they're not necessarily wrong. I know plenty of agents that are, you know, consistently turning 30, 40, 50 units a year, and they don't do what we consider traditional lead generation, but they've also been in this business for, you know, 5 to 10 years. So everyone that they know in their database knows that they're in real estate, knows to go to them. So it's a little bit easier. Whereas if you're newer in the business, we can't model off of those people and be like, oh, I'll just sit back and wait for my business to come to me. We need to be more purposeful about it. Otherwise, we'll turn into, I think it's 80%. I forget this number. It's 70 or 80% of agents will quit in their first year. You know, so it's like, do we want to be one of those people, or do we want to be those people that actually makes it to year 5? And I told you I started in 2016, so I'm not even really to year 5 yet. And year 5 is the real breaking point where you see if people are either going to stay in the business or fall out. If I keep looking down, I have my notes down here because I can't see them on my screen now. All right. So everyone does all these pieces in their business, right? Lead generate for buyers. And even the ones that say they're not lead generating, they are doing lead generation. And we'll kind of talk about that more. Then you work on your seller presentations to get listings, buyer presentations to get buyer listings, and you preview real estate, right? These are the 4 key things that you need to be working on in your business. And this is to grow your business. To run your business, that's where you're actually marketing listings, you're showing houses, doing open houses, negotiating contracts, etc. So, and we always call this, it's either working on your business or working in your business. So or growing your business would be working on your business, and running your business is working in your business. That's that day-to-day kind of grind stuff. The goal of our time here is to talk about models that other successful agents have used to grow and run their business, because why would we want to just start at the beginning and kind of shoot from the hip? And in full disclosure, I a little bit in that first year was shooting from my hip a little bit. You hear, you know, I was kind of that, what do they call it? Like the distracted squirrel. No, not distracted squirrel, that shiny object syndrome, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this, instead of just following one model to a T. And when we talk a little bit more about actually setting goals, I'll share the story of how I set my goal, like for that year, and how I actually missed it. And I know I actually could have hit that goal had I actually followed closer to a real model. So the skills we're going to work on today, or talk about today, are lead generating for buyers and sellers, setting goals, and attending trainings and getting coaching. Laura, remind me, we were just talking about bold, but toward the end of this, we want to talk about bold pivot. Someone remind me to do that. Otherwise I'll forget, because shiny objects. All right. So are there any questions about, actually, there's no questions yet. We're just going to go on. All right. So we're going to work on envisioning your big life, understanding what your goals are, how to do the activities, or how to hold yourself accountable to those activities, or finding outside accountability if you can't hold yourself accountable, which most likely you can't hold yourself accountable to a high level. We'll go over a recap, and then you guys will go on and do the daily success habits. All right. So this is a quote from The One Thing: who we are and where we want to go determine what we do and what we want to accomplish. So has anyone in here not read The One Thing? And it's actually, because I can't see all of you, it's going to be hard to tell.
I haven't.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
Log off right now. I'm kidding. Definitely like put it on your list right now of things to do during this whole shift. And it's interesting, like as a kind of side note, you'll see people online, or you'll even see like real estate mentors and gurus talk about, oh, well, with all this downtime, you shouldn't actually have downtime right now, right? Like I'm actually probably doing more I'm doing more activities now than I was a month ago, because I know that I have to survive the next few months in order to thrive in the year after that. But our time is more efficient, because how much, if you guys are going out and about, how much traffic are you seeing, right? I probably save literally at least an hour a day in a week. That's 5 to 7 hours of just not sitting in traffic, because I used to drive from my house to the office in traffic in the morning. That's about 30 minutes. In traffic in the evening, it's really closer to 45. So it's all this extra time is saved. You know, we can jump into a training here. The minute I get off this training, I have a list of 6 calls I need to make. I'm going to make those calls and I can go to the next thing. So in a way, we actually became more efficient in our time. And that's what I mean by, in this downtime, I would fill in some of those gaps with education, right? So if you haven't read The One Thing, it's a pretty, I don't have a copy of it here, but it's a pretty small book. It's, you know, like, you can't see it. It's only like that thick. It's a pretty short book. It's very powerful though, because it's about half mindset, half execution of how to be more laser focused on the goals that you set. And so back to this quote of who we are and where we want to go determine what we do and what we accomplish, is basically saying it's only your mindset, right? Like your mindset, having a bigger mindset is going to lead to bigger goals, and having a smaller mindset is going to lead to smaller goals. Another quote similar to this is one that stuck with me pretty early on, is you have to do what others don't to get what others won't, right? So we have to do the activities that everyone else is ignoring right now in order to get what those other people are not going to get through this kind of shifting time. And so this is also from the one thing, it's just a diagram showing the difference between your thinking, your time and effort, and what kind of outcomes you get from it. So I'm going to skip to this next slide real quick. So if you're the smaller thinker, your thinking is small, so you're putting in less time and effort. Naturally, if you're putting in less effort, you're going to get a smaller outcome. Whereas if you're one of the people that has the bigger thoughts, the bigger, thinking large, thinking more infinite versus finite, that's another big topic people are talking about right now, then you're naturally going to lead to bigger outcomes. And this seems super simple. If I do more activities, I get more outcomes. But at the same time, I started off this little presentation by saying, how many people do we know in the Bay Area that say like, you can't do 24 transactions in your first year? Our average in the Bay Area is likely lower, and we can talk a little bit later about why that might be from a unit perspective, but it's those smaller mindsets. If I say I'm going to do 6 deals a year, and I know to do 6 deals a year, I need to take 3 listings, yada, yada, all of a sudden I'm focused way down in this small part. I might hit those goals and that's great, but I'm not ever going to be able to go bigger than that. Does that not make sense to anybody, or does it pretty much make sense? Okay. I saw a head nod, so we're moving on. All right. So if you go to your participant guide, if you have it on your laptop right there or printed, it's on page 3. And it's this exercise about figuring out what the vision of your life looks like from a goal setting perspective, like right now, because it's real easy for us to think of goals from strictly a unit or GCI perspective, right? Like if I say, when I was productivity coaching, a lot of new agents, especially in Sacramento, and say, oh, well, what's your goal? Like how much business do you want to do in your first year? And a lot of them don't know. And so we instantly transition that to, okay, how much money do you want to make in your first year? And I would say, just purely guessing, 7 to 8 times out of 10, the answer was $100,000. I want to make $100,000 in my first year, or I want to sell 12 houses in my first year. And we can tell that they're coming up with those goals for 2 reasons. One, like if it's 12 units a year, it's because they're just simply thinking, I want to sell 1 house a month, right? Like you can usually tell that's how they came up with that number. It just sounds like an interesting number. 1 house a month doesn't seem overly impossible when you've never tried before. And then 2, when people say $100,000, they're basing that goal around the fact that they've probably never made $100,000 before. And that's kind of like the mythical 6 figures, right? So maybe they've made $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, but if I can make $100,000, I remember when I was a kid, or not even a kid, like really not that long ago, about 6 years ago, it was, man, if I can make $100,000, that's like the pinnacle of success. And that is a small mindset, which leads to small actions, which leads to small outcomes. If you're familiar with who Mike Brody is, so Tony Brody is our regional operating partner for a region. His dad is Mike Brody, who came into Keller Williams pretty early on. And he came to our office one day and was talking about the 10 different revenue streams of business that he has. And he said, the first year that he had to write the IRS a $1 million check was like the most bittersweet moment ever, because if he has 10 streams of business, I'm sure he's very smart on tax sheltering, right? Or tax structuring in order to make sure you're paying as little tax as possible. If he had to pay $1 million in taxes, it's because he brought in probably 3 to 4 million in income. So that was like the first time where I realized like $100,000, as neat as it is, it's an arbitrary number that I need to get out of my head. And that was like my first breakthrough in setting my goals. So what we always talk about is tying your business goals to a big why, or in this case, we're calling it a big life. So in this exercise, what you do is you go through different aspects of your life and try to determine how much money, like if you think of it from a financial standpoint, how much money do you need to hit in each area of your life to achieve those goals. So an example they use in here says, maybe you want to be able to care for your parents as they age, send your kids to school without debt, or pay for a vacation for you and your best friend. For a cause, perhaps you would like to be named supporter of your local animal shelter or serve on the board of a charity you care about, right? So in order to hit those goals, like that defines kind of your perfect life. If you hit all of those goals, then, essentially there's no such, it's not like you hit that goal and suddenly you're happy. But if that's what leads to you having what you define as a perfect life, what types of income do you need in each of those areas to get there? So in this example on the screen, they say Sarah and Hunter, assume that's these person's kids. It says get through school debt free. They need $120,000. Right. So once they hit $120,000 in that account, they've essentially filled that bucket. And then they've determined that in order to be the influential person they want to be with this cat habitat, they need to be able to donate $5,000 in a year to that cat habitat. And so then you start tying these monetary goals to what your one big why is, or not even your one big why, but to what your big life looks like. And I've sat with new agents when they say, oh, it's not about money. They get all like this, like, it's not about money. Okay, sure. It's not about money. It's about getting your kid through school debt free. Like, especially right now when, it's a very hot topic of student loans. If you can get 2 kids through school debt free for $120,000, that's the real goal. Then it's going to take $120,000 to do it. So don't fool yourself into thinking it's not about money. In a way, it is about money. So I don't think it's our best use time to sit here and do this right now, but if you have a couple ideas, scribble them down real quick. And then if anything today, put it on your list of things that you're going to do today, is to actually come up with a financial goal of at least 5 areas of your life. Find 5 areas, whether it's paying off your mortgage, whether it's maybe buying an investment property. How much would it cost to buy investment properties that will bring in, say, $24,000 a year or something like that? Like, come up with these goals and start drawing them out. And don't necessarily trick yourself into thinking that this has to be done this year. What if it actually looks like, I'm going to set these goals for next year and work through them now, right? Because if we're new agents, it's going to be harder to hit those massive goals in that first year. So think a little bit bigger and say, okay, by the end of next year, I'm going to hit these goals, but these are things I need to do right now to get there. Any questions so far? It's pretty not difficult to understand, but a piece of business that people skip over. Has anybody just thought, I just need to get my license and start working, right? And it's like, okay, that's great. And how many agents do you know their goal to retire is essentially, I'm just going to work until I hit some magic number, like say it's $10 million in the bank account, and all they're going to do is work to get there. They're setting a goal based off of one target. And if you don't tie these big whys to your targets, it falls apart real quick. Has anybody actually thought about what a big why is in their life to tie their business to? Like, does anybody have a big why already?
Yes.
I'm just using this as an excuse to not talk, so someone should.
I know that feeling. Hi, this is Yvonne. Yes, my big why is to leave a legacy for my family
Okay.
and to help as many people as I can on the way.
What does a legacy look like for you, Yvonne?
Independence, financial independence, where if they, for myself, is having my own business. I was working in the restaurant business for many years and I made good money, but there was always a cap. There was always, I could only make so much because the time only allowed me to make so much.
I guess everyone familiar with the concept of exchanging time for money, right? And so that's what you're talking about, Yvonne, right? Is like, if I work for a company and you're like purely in that employee bracket, all you can do is exchange time for money. And maybe you can go work more and get more money, but it's not like you can leverage out any piece of that life, right? You might have a retirement in 20 years, but how many people do you think were planning on retiring next year that now they have no idea what's going on with their jobs, right? Like suddenly, like, I don't know if anybody felt how fast this mindset had to shift over the last 3 weeks. I know actually that it was literally within a week that we all had to go from, something might be going on in the market, to 1 week later, no open houses, no showing properties that aren't vacant in our counties, buyers that are suddenly perhaps reluctant because if they're unsure, they don't know where they're going. You have sellers that maybe they were about to move, they can't move, right? All of a sudden, everything turned upside down. And even though we're in a position where our income just maybe became a little less, in a way, easy to go after, at the same time, we have 100% control over it. Whereas if you're an employee working for a big corporation and you just got told, hey, sorry, you're out, like, or you're furloughed. So you still have a job. We just can't pay you right now. So don't work for a month, 2 months. My brother-in-law is in a sales position and they just got told, he first got told he was getting laid off and they backed it up to say, well, you're not laid off, but you can only work 3 weeks a month. And so in one way you can say, wow, I get a week off a month. Well, you don't get paid for that week either. And so then all of a sudden, it's a shift, but at least in this one, we have 100% control of what we're doing in our businesses. And to me, that's a big freedom. Was anyone else going to say anything about their big whys?
This is Myrna, and I'm actually a new agent. And I think for me, it's financial freedom and be able to move. So I was an employee, and there's a book that I highly recommend because it made me think in different ways. It's called the Cash Flow Quadrant. So especially explains from being an employee to self-employed, moving into a business owner, and eventually becoming an investor, to the point where like your investments are making you the same amount of money that you need to live on. So so for me, it's financial freedom and be able to kind of like think ahead and plan how I move from one quadrant to the other, and go from there. Yeah.
And like both you and Yvonne kind of had the same thing, right? It's about financial independence. Then, so one of the first things, I actually tried going to a different brokerage when I was waiting to get my license. The broker didn't call me back. I accidentally came to Keller Williams and went to a career night, and the team leader talked to me afterwards because I was one of only 2 people that was actually far enough like into the process, to sit down and talk about next steps. And the first thing we did was go over goal setting, because she said, how many deals do you want to, or how much business you, however she worded it. I said, oh, I think I want to sell 12 deals. I think if I sold 12 deals, I'd be pretty successful, because I have no idea, right? And I chose that arbitrary number of 1 deal a month. So she actually had me do an exercise that I highly encourage everybody to do, which is essentially pick a date, pick a year and say, on this year, I need to make X number of dollars. Like, what does your financial freedom look like at that year? And so like for mine, I chose 55 because I know a lot of people are striving to retire by 65. So I was like, okay, well, if I retired at 55? And so that gave me like 23 years at the time to achieve that. And I said, I still have them written down. And when you want to talk about big goals versus small goals, it was crazy. It was like my big goal was achieved in year 3. Like that's how small that goal was at the time. But you back up. So you say, okay, if I need to do this in 20 years, what do I have to do in 10 years to make sure I'm getting there? Then what do I have to do in 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, this month, this week, this day, right? And so it's just backing it up. And then you start setting these little like goals along the way to say, okay, if in 3 years I'm achieving this goal, I'm on my way to achieving that ultimate goal, which is financial freedom. But you kind of have to have an idea of what does financial freedom look like in the end. And I know some agents too that are like, I don't want to think that far out. Like, who knows what will happen? Yeah, who knows? So set a massive goal. And if you fall short, you're probably still doing pretty good. So, yeah. All right. So understanding your goal. Does everyone understand that this is not too hard to understand? So when we set a GCI goal, so let's just use $500,000 as an example. Say like, I want to make 500,000 in GCI. A danger of focusing on GCI is that suddenly all your money goes away to all sorts of different things, right? So if you have a listing, instantly half of that commission goes to the other agent, right? To the point that we don't even, here's a better slide. To the point that we don't actually even count that. When we look at commissions, we say, oh, like my side would be 3% or 2.5%, 3%. Well, it's because the other side of the transaction is getting that other half of the money. So that's gone instantly. Or if you're on a team, if on a 50-50 split, that's another example that, 50% is out right out the door. And then you have about 30% of that commission check goes to your market center for the support that they're giving you. And if you think about the amount of support that we're getting right now from all of our market centers, I think we can all suddenly prove how valuable that 30% is. Then you have your business expenses, which is usually, like, if you're within the model, it's about 30 to 40% of your gross income, which means this last remaining chunk is your take home. So if you set too small of a goal, maybe you say, oh, I'll sell $240,000 in gross commission. Well, suddenly once you subtract all this other pieces, maybe that's now suddenly only $50,000. And maybe $50,000 doesn't help you get to those big why goals that we were talking about a moment ago. Did someone have a question, or did they just sneeze? Okay. Does everyone understand this? That we can focus on gross, which is the whole dollar, or we can start focusing on your net profit. If you're familiar with, our family reunion and mega camp events in August, last year, Gary made a change to who he allows to be on stage, to the point that if you're invited to be on stage with Gary, where he's going to interview you and talk about how great your business is, he's actually now requiring that he personally goes over your profit and loss statement before they confirm your time to be on stage. Because if he doesn't feel that you're profitable enough, why does he want you promoting your business to 180,000 agents worldwide? right? And so because so many people are focused on, oh my God, I brought in, 3 million in GCI. And if you've heard me speak before, you've heard this example of, it's a real example from a real agent in our state that he brought in something like 3.5 million in GCI, and they profited under $70,000. So that means essentially 2 or 3.34 or so million dollars went out as expenses. If you're throwing away all your money, what's it matter at the end of the day? I don't care how much you can make on this side of the whole dollar if you're only keeping this tiny sliver. So we need to control our expenses in a way and focus on the net profit, because that's what we get to keep at the end of the day, except for then there's taxes. And we won't really talk about taxes that much because there's different ways to structure it. All right. So I actually went in and filled in real numbers from our markets into this. And so this is an example of walking through making sure we're setting a goal big enough to achieve those financial dreams, right? So I used an average sales price of $900,000. You might be higher, you might be lower, but this is a pretty good average when you look at across our 3 counties. Especially newer agents seem to many times end up with buyers before sellers, and buyers were typically getting paid a little bit less than sellers. So I just went with $900,000 average sales price, and I used 2.5% as an average commission, and I did a little rounding for simplicity's sake. But that's just, I like to, if we plan a little lower, for not, if we set a big goal, but plan these conversion rates a little bit lower, okay, if your average commission ended up being 2.75, you surpass this goal, and that's fantastic. So there's a difference between setting a big goal and then setting realistic conversion rates, or maybe even a little bit lower conversion rates. Okay. So market centers are going to vary a little bit on this first line. But I believe most people here are probably at the same thing. You have your $30,000 cap, and most people are on a 70-30 split. Some people are on 80-20s. It all depends on a whole host of various factors. So we're just, for this example, using a 70-30 split at $30,000 cap. And then some people don't understand this. The entire company pays the same franchise royalty fee. So whether you're in California, Kansas, New York City, doesn't matter. We all pay the same $3,000 royalty. So our cost of goods sold ends up being $33,000 if you're selling enough to be a capping agent. And so that means if I set a net income goal of $300,000, so remember, this is net income. Gross means total amount of money coming in. Net means what I'm actually keeping at the end of the year, except for taxes, right? So if I want to keep $300,000 to achieve those big goals, those big dreams in 1 year, plus I have $33,000 company dollar in royalty cap, plus, for this example, I just assumed $50,000 of expenses. That's if you don't have an assistant, you don't have buyer's agents, you're maybe not doing a lot of marketing, you're taking advantage of Command Lead Accelerator instead of dumping thousands a month into Zillow. So add these up and you come up with I need a total GCI of $383,000. So these get added because this is net, which means that this is gross. This is now my gross income goal, divided by the average GCI of $23,000. So that's our average commission check, comes up with a transaction goal of 17. So I need to close 17. In reality, this number came out to like 16.3, blah, blah, blah. If it ever comes up, don't use traditional rounding rules. If it ever goes over 16, round up to 17. So if it's 16.1 houses, your goal is now 17, because again, we want to shoot that little bit higher on the conversion rate. And then because then it just works out better. You can't sell 16.1 houses. So shoot for 17 and you'll be a happier person. Does anybody have any questions on this? Because numbers are confusing, basically. Does anyone have any questions? Cool.
I think the only thing you forgot is the taxes. We have to pay taxes, right?
Right. So the reason we don't really talk about taxes that much is everyone's tax situation is different. So like I hold all of my real estate in an S corporation. So my taxes work out wildly different than somebody that is just a sole proprietor paying their own taxes. It creates too many different scenarios, which is why we could break that down even farther to say, okay, if I want to actually have $300,000 net income in my bank account after setting aside for taxes, like I can do that as well. But it's just not a topic that we're covering right now. But if you're not setting aside money for taxes along the way, you're making a mistake. I remember when I was a brand new agent, like there were 3 people that I was kind of attached to the most, 3 top producing agents I was kind of attached to the most in the office. And I later found out, like later in the year, all 3 of them were in trouble with the IRS. And when I say trouble, I mean actually having a large sum that they had still owed the IRS from previous misfilings, essentially, of not setting aside, not filing their quarterly taxes. And if you don't know how much money you need to be setting aside or filing quarterly, talk to a CPA. Like that's probably the most effective $400 you'll spend in a year is talking to a CPA.
I heard a good recommendation from an agent, from whatever your transaction is, to save 30% of that just for taxes when it comes around.
Yeah, I think 30% is a very safe number. That if you take 30% of this net and set that aside, you're good to go. You know, and if you did 30% of gross, that's like even better. But just as an example, I set aside less than that because I've worked with my CPA to say, okay, this is what my wife's income goal is. This is what my income goal is. And if I'm hitting this income goal, this is what my expenses will look like, you know, like a true business plan instead of just shooting from the hip. And so as long as we stay within those margins, he tells us, okay, then you will owe this much in taxes at the end of the year, right? Because it's tax law. It's not, you know, the IRS, as much as it might seem like it, they don't just at the end of the year go, I think you owe this much money. You know, it's actually calculable to figure out how much you'll owe at the end of the year. And so I want to make sure that is either set aside or already submitted to the IRS by the end of the year. Otherwise you owe money. And that's a neat surprise when you have $0 in your bank account and suddenly you have a $12,000 check from the, or a bill from the IRS. So don't get yourself in that situation. Don't buy the boat until you know you paid your taxes. All right. How many people have actually set their goals in Command? Ooh, I like that face, Renee. All right, what we're going to do, I'm going to log into my Command, and the goal setting capabilities in Command and the way that we run dashboards and reports is one of my up and coming favorite things of Command. Like it's not my favorite yet. That's Lead Accelerator, but it's up and coming. Okay, so, all right. I'm showing you my Command, which means you have to promise if you know any of these people, you don't call them. Especially a lot of these live over in San Jose. So can everyone see my screen? Or can anyone see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you can actually go through and set your goals. I have to remember how because it's been a while. So you can set goals in Command. So that when you log in, here's my dashboard, see where I'm at on my annual goal. And this is my annual goal. And this is where I'm at so far. So I'm 6% of the way and we're coming on half the year. That tells me right now, uh-oh. Right? It means I need to increase my activities. I haven't been logging appointments and I'm not sure how this actually gets logged, but it kind of gives you a quick overall view of where you're at in your goals. And then if you come on the left side here and come to reports, I'll break it down in a much larger way for you. See if I come to goals. Okay. So I'm registered on a team right now, which is why it's showing up as team goals. But from top to bottom, we can see, okay, how many contacts have we made compared to how many contacts we need? How many leads have we brought in to how many leads do we need? All these numbers were actually generated automatically for us through command. So if I come up here into goal settings, it's going to take you into this Kelly guide and walk you through how to set your goals very similarly to how we just did with walking through that example. So the big key point right here is, what is your 2020 annual profit goal? So that doesn't mean your gross commission goal. This is how much money do you want to keep at the end of the year? And so I went with, in this case, $240,000, just as an example, with expenses being, I think this was 40% or 30% of this goal, just using simple math, essentially. Cost of sales, we know our cost of sales is $33,000, $30,000 to the market center, $3,000 to KWRI. I went with a simple 50-50 business makeup for buyers versus sellers. If you are not focused on sellers at all, shift this to 100-0. Or if you want to focus more on listings, because that's generally a better business practice, may make this 75-25. But in general, most even larger teams are pretty much staying close to a 50-50 makeup. So it's just a good assumption. And then I just went with $20,000 average commission per unit. We're a slightly lower GCI on this side of the hill in Santa Cruz. Oh, don't crash on me. Here we go. All right, so this is the conversion rates that KWRI already put in for you. So saying someone that comes in as a lead, they have a 10% or a 1 in 10 chance of converting into a closed commission, versus a person that you actually put under contract, they have a 90% chance of becoming a closed commission in different steps along the way. You can modify these if you want. If you know, for instance, appointments set to appointments kept, by default, they made 60%. If you are setting only high quality appointments, you might set this higher. You know, if you know, if you've done enough business to track your business to say, I know that I'm doing 80-90% appointment set to appointment kept, change these numbers. But at the beginning, if you haven't done enough to really know these numbers to an accurate amount, just leave these as is. And if you've only closed a handful of transactions, I would probably leave these the same. All the time setting goals, you'll hear someone say, oh, I've never had a listing fall out of contract. Like, I've closed every listing that I've ever, put on the MLS. Yeah, so far you have. But, it's easy to say that when you're talking about even 9 or 10 listings. But how many people do you think have listings right now on the market that are not probably, but are more likely to expire or end up being canceled now than they were 3 or 4 months ago, right? So I actually like to see this one. I really like agreements under contract or pending to close, 75%. So, all right, hit save. Takes you right back. We're just going to close this. And that's when it'll update your goals for you to actually show how many leads based off of, where's the income goal? Based off of this annual profit goal, we know it just reverse backs up the number to say, okay, bring in 35,000 leads in a year in order to hit that goal. So 35,000 divided by 12. This is saying 3,000 leads a month. Man, that seems like a lot. That conversion, though, is also going to be, what kind of lead is that? Are we talking only internet leads? Because maybe, that actually needs to be. And these aren't necessarily people that we've talked to, that's a contact. Or is it, okay, so I need 1,800 contacts a month. These are just the number of people I need to actually have a conversation with, or sorry, in a year. All of a sudden it seems like not that many, or I need 160 total appointments, both buyers and sellers. All of a sudden my 480,000 annual profit goal becomes a lot more realistic when we actually look at the numbers. Any questions about that? This is another one that I highly recommend getting into, if not today, over the weekend, and actually setting these goals and actually start tracking them, see what's happening as you're going through the year, because we're still relatively early in the year if you haven't done this yet. And maybe your goals are shifting a little bit based off of what's going on in the market. All right, let's get back to the other screen.
As far as you know, Jason, if we were to actually go in now and do it, would it retro everything? I assume it's drawing from opportunities. So if I've closed a couple in the opportunities, would it automatically pull it into the goals?
I believe so.
Okay.
Like you saw that one in there where it said there was a closed transaction in there.
Mhm.
I didn't put that in there. It popped up automatically. So.
Okay. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Yes, thank you. So it's when those, so it's automatically in there. I'm not sure if it's from watching the opportunities or if it's from watching the MCA side of things. But,
and I would assume that with the conversion rates that you put in there for the different levels, that goes into opportunities too. So when you put someone in to an opportunity, and I know this is something you guys will look at in the future, but when you put something in the opportunities, it will carry that percentage over, correct?
I don't know that they're actually talking to each other yet. In theory,
Okay.
That's a good goal. Or I mean, that's a good,
Okay.
it's a good probable, but I'm not sure. Cool. All right, moving on. So now you've, set your right mindset, you understand your goal. Now you're going to do the activities to actually achieve those goals. Is anyone not familiar with the 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto principle? So this is from an Italian, it's also in The One Thing. In fact, The One Thing is basically just describing this in a few different ways, right? That it's this Italian economist discovered, back in, it doesn't say on here, a long time ago, an Italian economist discovered that 80% of the wealth of people were, the wealth of the country was actually owned by just 20% of the people, right? And so then they start to realize this rule or principle applies to a lot more than that. And it's that 80% of the results that you need in life actually come from 20% of the effort. So that means when you have 100 things that you're doing in a day, only 20 of them led to 80% of your income. And so if we focus on these 20% activities, the 20% of things that produce the most results, if we nail those activities and do them at a higher level, all of a sudden we're getting 80% of our results, and it's essentially making things more easy as we go. Whereas if you're focusing on the 80% of stuff that doesn't matter nearly as much, and you're only, and that's only affecting 20% of your income, suddenly you're working way harder and getting less out of that time. Going back to the idea of exchanging time for money, we want to increase that amount as much as possible. I want to put in this much time to get this much money, not the other way around. Whereas you're at basically a 50-50 when you're an employee. I put in 8 hours of work, I got paid for 8 hours of work. So in The One Thing, this is called the focusing question. It's what is the one thing that you can do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And this gets repeated over and over and over. And it's really something that you should be using almost as like a mantra in your life, or an affirmation, right? what is the one thing right now that I could be doing that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And if you've been trying, an interesting example of this is if you've been trying to get into technology, into, we have Command, we have all these things, and maybe you're not the most tech savvy person and it's a lot to learn and understand. You'll see people like Jason Abrams in our company saying, you need to be dedicating time every day to learning it. And I've seen so many agents turn that around to be like, well, it's not my one thing. My one thing is getting new business and it's not learning technology. So why should I do this? It's like, okay, you can have more than one thing. And you use this focusing question on different things. So right here where it says do right now, add in a little blank right here. So, and say, what is the one thing you can do right now in your business that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Suddenly you're only thinking about your business. Okay, maybe that's lead generation. And then you say, what is the one thing you can do right now in my personal life that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And if you're married, it's probably taking something off the other person's plate, right? And if I'm doing that one thing right now, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. In my financial life, in my going back to personal life, for vacations, is going on that one big vacation a year going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? And how do I get there? Anyway, so you can have multiple one things going on in a day or in a month, week, year. Don't think that this is something that it's only one thing. You have multiple one things. All right. So if this is what successful agents do every day that we talked about at the beginning, someone mentioned it earlier, so I'll just jump right to it. The one thing that you can do to grow your business, the one thing that you can do to grow your business that would make everything else easier or unnecessary is lead generating for buyers and sellers. Like right now, if you don't have a seller appointment to go on, doesn't matter what your seller listing presentation looks like. Doesn't matter what your buyer presentation looks like. You could argue that previewing real estate still highly important right now. Anything that is out there, even if you're only previewing it through virtual tours, but understanding what's on the market, yes, highly important. You should be doing this every day. And it's not your one thing, because your one thing, I can go look at every house that comes on the MLS every day and I can know everything about it inside and out. Doesn't matter if I don't lead generate for buyers and sellers. So this is the one thing for most agents. And when I say most agents, it's basically all agents. Kind of same with running the business. Yeah, it'd be great to market seller listings. I don't have a listing right now. I have to go get a listing through lead generation. I'm guessing that makes sense to most people, right?
Yes.
What are people doing right now for lead generation? Like, we stopped doing open houses. Open houses was my favorite thing, and we stopped doing that. So what else are we doing for lead generation right now?
Calling past clients.
So talking to our sphere or past clients. And if you don't have past clients, talking to everyone else
all the leads I have in my database.
Yeah. Maybe calling through, okay, maybe you had been doing open houses, even if only for a month before all this. How many open house leads did you have? Go call those people, right? Yeah, it's old leads. I mean, it's basically, in a way, we're a little limited to calling people. Because even if we did determine that for, like, let's say I determined it's okay for me to go door knocking. I don't think it's okay right now, but let's say I said, I'm going to go door knocking. Those sellers might not be okay with me door knocking. And then suddenly I'm actually burning a business. Also, talking about efficiency, like I said, when I'm done here in a few minutes, I need to go I have 6 people I need to call today for sure. I'm going to call more than that, but I have 6 I need to talk to. So it's like, okay, get off the phone, go call those 6 people. Suddenly I'm going to go call 7 more. Well, that saves a lot more time than putting out signs for an open house, sitting there waiting for people to show up to the open house, door knocking and seeing who's going to answer the door. I'm suddenly calling people who are more likely to pick up their phone. So it's actually, in a way, we might actually be more efficient and effective right now as a kind of funny byproduct of what's going on. And then for accountability. So there are people that believe that they can hold themselves accountable to their goals. And what's funny about that is they'll say that, but then they're totally off from their goals and they're not where they want to be in life. And, you know, it's clear they didn't hold themselves accountable to their goals. So that's where coaching comes in. If you have a coach, they're probably using something like this, especially if it's KW coach, they're probably using something like this to hold you accountable. If not, it might be something to even introduce to them. And if you don't have a coach, you could look at getting a coach. And at the end of the day, if you're just like, I'm not getting a coach right now, you can use one of these for yourself, a 411. My wife actually uses one. She's not in real estate, and she uses a 411 for her goals because she's not employed right now. And so she realized every goal she was setting, she wasn't hitting, right? Because if you're not tracking a goal, you're not going to get there. So the way this form works is you have your annual goals, and there's different variations of this form. Actually, here's another one that's going to be, you're not going to be able to see because of the virtual background. It's just a way to track your annual goals, your monthly goals, and your weekly goals. So annual goals, you might put, you know, close 24 transactions, you know, put in, or net 100,000 in my savings account, buy 3 investment properties. You know, you might have some of these goals up here, and then your monthly goals need to lead into your annual goals. So if I need to close 24 transactions by the end of the year, how many transactions this month do I need to pend? How many open houses do I need to do this month to get the amount of leads to lead toward that goal? If it's a savings goal, how much money do I need to save every month? You know, because then if I needed to save 10,000 this month, or if I need to save 10,000 every month and I only save 5,000 this month, maybe suddenly it's okay. Now this month, for the month of April, I actually need to save 15,000 because I missed it last month. And then weekly goals, weekly goals, the trap people fall into on these is they turn this into just a to-do list. Oh, I need to pick up my dry cleaning. I need to, I got to do that Costco run. You know, like, don't think of this as your task list. Think of this as your must-do list. What are the, call it 4 or 5 things you must do this week to help you achieve your monthly goal, which will help you achieve your annual goal. You know, so going back to the examples, if it was, I need to host 8 virtual open houses this month, maybe I'm going to host 2 this week, 2 this week, 2 this week, etc. Same with the financial savings goal. If I need to save $8,000 in a month, this week I need to make sure $2,000 goes into that, right? And so it's just a way to break down those goals into bite-sized pieces that are a little bit more attainable. Any questions about the 411? I think it says that there's an example on page 7 in your participant guide. If you don't have a copy and you want a copy, drop your email in the chat and I'll send you an email after this, because I have a template. It has a different market center's name on it. I have a template of this that I can send you. And again, you can use different things, and there's even a way to do it through Keller. You can do it on your phone. You can do it through different apps. It doesn't matter, as long as you're doing something to hold yourself accountable or to let your coach hold you accountable to these goals. So cool. All right. And then the big thing is, don't lose your focus and remind yourself of why you're doing something. So going back to that beginning example that I started with was, and I set my initial goal and I said, I'm going to sell 12 houses, right? And my team leader talked me out of that. And so I changed the goal to 24 houses. And the 24 wasn't to say 2 a month. It was really just to say that that would help me get to that goal of when I was 55 of having that much money. That's why I had to do that year. So I said 24 units. Then I took Ignite, and my coach in Ignite actually convinced me to think bigger. And I had gone to a couple trainings since then, and I started thinking bigger. All of a sudden I changed my goal to 36 units a year. And I said, and I knew it was, you know, we always talk about specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based goals called a SMART goal. It was specific, it was measurable. I knew it was achievable because people have sold, you know, 20 or 36 houses in a year. I also knew it was realistic because another agent in our office 2 years before me had sold 35 houses in his first year. So I changed it to 36. The problem was I set that goal of 36 only to go beat that guy, right? Like it was one person. I didn't have a real why tied to it. I eventually created a why, which was to prove other people wrong. Like it was written on my board, to prove others wrong, or to prove them wrong was written on my whiteboard in my office. That why was too short though. You know, like I achieved it in 1 year. Well, I missed 36 transactions. I ended up closing 26, which was still 2 more than my 24 goal and was more than double my original goal at 12. So in one way you look at it, it's like, oh man, good job. Like massive success. Yay, whatever. But the other side of the coin is that I missed the 36 goal and I didn't have a big enough why tied to it. So when it got really tough in October, I closed 9 transactions in a month. I was burnout. I was tired, upset, kind of angry. And I also looked at it as I made, I think, $80,000 that month. And I was like, I'm good. You know, I can coast to the end of the year. I already hit my goal because I didn't have a big why tied to it. And that's what I was saying earlier, that had I actually had a bigger why tied to it, then I might have pushed harder to get through to that goal. And I told myself and my wife, if I hit 36 transactions, I would buy a boat. In October, when I was burnt out, I didn't care about a boat anymore. I was like, I don't care. I don't want the boat. Like, I don't have time to go in the boat because I'm too busy, under leveraged. So having a big why is it's probably the most important thing you can do in your mindset, is having a real why. And it doesn't have to be solving homelessness. It doesn't have to be any like massive thing like that. It just needs to be something that you're committed to doing. Because accountable people achieve results others can only dream of, right? So set the big goals, get held accountable to those goals, and that's basically it, right? Like you have to think big, you have to figure out what actions it will take to hit your big goals, and then having someone hold you accountable. And before you think, I'm going to use my spouse, don't use a spouse to hold you accountable. It's terrible. My wife is too involved in my business at times, and it will quickly become a nagging thing and on either side. And so you don't use an outside source. And what I would encourage you guys to do, being an Ignite, is finding an accountability partner with an Ignite. And, you know, someone, whether they're in your office or even in another one of the offices in the area or even outside the area, just find someone that you can talk to on, even if it's a daily basis, you know, check in for 10 minutes in the morning. Hey, did you get up on time? What are your 3 big things you're going to accomplish today? Or what's your 1 big thing you're going to accomplish today? And, you know, it can be a 5-minute phone call or even text conversation, but someone that you respect, that you're being held accountable to. And that is the end of that. So does anyone have any ahas or questions? Was this helpful for anybody? Nope, not helpful.
Thanks, Jason.
It was really helpful.
Yep.
Cool.
You know, one of the things, just real quickly, one of the things I really struggled with was my why. And I felt like the reason I was struggling is because I felt like it was the why that had to be forever. And it's like, okay, what's my big why forever? And it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, what's your big why now? What do you want to, right now, my big why is getting out of debt. So it doesn't have to be a forever, I'll have to change my big why when I do get out of debt. But I got stuck for a number of years thinking that I had to come up with this huge big why.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, it's got to be big enough to get you past a year, right? So my goal was to prove them wrong. To me, that's like the most infinite goal ever, because there's always a different them. But I had a specific them in mind, and I proved them wrong, right? Because I had people in the military literally tell me that you are not going to make it, right? Like they knew I was leaving the military to go into real estate, and they were like, see you in a year. I almost went back 1 month later. Like almost. I got out, I got offered a kind of crazy cool job if I were to come back to the military. I almost went back, but I didn't. And so my goal was to prove those people wrong that said I wasn't going to make it. And I made, more than double the money that they would make in a year. And so inside I was like, yes, like I made more money than they even know. It's like, okay, that's a stupid goal. like if you read Simon Sinek's new book, The Infinite Game, it's all about, it might be my favorite book, like a favorite book, period. Like that's it. And it's about setting a goal big enough that isn't essentially setting an unachievable goal in a way, and people are afraid of setting too big of a goal because, oh, what if I miss it? Who cares? like what if you achieve it? Yeah, Mary.
Oh, I like the time chunking that you talked about. And sometimes even with kind of the uncertainty, looking at a time of 5 years is not unreasonable, and then working backwards. And so if you don't reach that goal at the end of this 1 year, are you still on track for that 5 years? It kind of gives you a little perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it's chunk things down, like and I'm one of those people where I'm like, I like to look at that big goal of, oh, what would it look like in 5 years? And, oh, I could have this house or that car or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I have to sell like 100 houses. Like no one's selling. There's one person in our county selling 100 houses. And so then it becomes daunting. But when you break it down, okay, in 5 years, if I want to do that, that means this year I only need to sell 24. 24 seems like a lot, but then it really comes down to I have to do 2 open houses a week. That's really all it is. And then follow up with all those people. That's really what it breaks down to, is 2 open houses a week. Until this whole thing, that was easy. Now it's a little bit harder, but we adapt. So. Cool. Oh, you forgot to remind me to talk about Bold. So good job. So Bold, if everyone's familiar with what Bold was/is, it was a 8-week course or 7-week course with a coach and groups of people. And it's one of my favorite courses to take once a year. Right. And it's about, yes, big thinking, but a little bit more, whereas Ignite is like, here's how to build the basics of business. Bold is about, here's how to actually go hit those goals and think like even bigger. There was supposed to be a Bold launch in, I think, May. And obviously getting 100 people in a room together right now isn't legal, let alone ethical, or socially responsible. So what KW did was they created a thing called Bold Pivot. And so it's going to be essentially one massive Bold. And we've kind of been warned, it's Bold Pivot. It's not Bold 2.0. It's a different Bold. It'll be a different experience. It's only $99. So it's, to me, extremely little risk in spending that. And it's twice a week, 2 hours a day, and then from home. Whereas I just took Bold in March at Palo Alto. So I had to drive to Palo Alto, took an hour and a half because of traffic. Then I'd have to drive home. That's an hour and a half. So that's 3 hours of driving. once a week, plus 6 hours in class. So it's a 9-hour a week time commitment. This is 4 hours a week from home. And the Bold coaches are high level trained, like hand selected, some of the best trainers in our industry. So I think it's mapscoaching.com. If not, your offices have the information. I highly recommend it. Renee said she signed up. I'm going to get signed up. I just procrastinate. But I'm definitely going to do it. I think they have over 10,000 people already registered. So it'll be a good old time. And not to knock on other companies, but the fact that our company is saying we're going to go, not only do we already have a great base of training, we're going to add more training, then we're going to essentially rewrite an entire course and offer it to the entire company. And they did all that within a month is mind-boggling to me. Like, it's astounding when other companies are literally removing agents from their company. So take advantage of it. And I mean, you're all in Ignite, so you're already taking advantage of training. Lean into it, because that's what's going to help you get through this exciting time. So, any last questions? Laura, if you're on, do you want to say anything? All right. Well, I'm taking that as a no. So absolutely do those daily activities, the 10 fours, add 10 contacts to your database, have 10 conversations, 10 handwritten notes, and preview homes. If we can't preview homes in person necessarily, go find the virtual tours and tour through them and kind of see what people are actually putting out there.
One question, Jason.
Yeah.
How do you do a virtual open house?
Okay, so if you're watching any of the Facebook groups, remember those are national level groups, right? So you have people putting out, oh, just do an open house. Just go to the house and walk through it with your phone. We can't do that because you guys have roughly the same county rules we have. So how could you host an open house without physically being at the house? Does anyone have any ideas?
Well, I do have a walking virtual tour from my sellers living in the house. It's done. It's a beautiful virtual tour they made for me.
Okay. How could you, let's act like the seller doesn't know how to use technology. How could we actually make it seem like we're in the house? Tell you what, I'll just show you. So what I did, hold on, I'm dropping a link. Don't watch it right now, but copy that link that I just dropped in the chat. That's to a video that I created of walking through a house using Matterport. So I tried to essentially make it the same as, let's say someone walks into your open house. I have roughly the same script every time. Like, first to introduce myself, ask how they found out about the house, but then it's always the same thing. Oh, you saw it online? Great. Then you know this is a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 4,000 square foot house. You know, we went on the market last week. It's listed at $2.6 million, right? Like, it's the same script every time. And then I tell them, so take a look around and let me know if you have any questions. So what I did instead was using software called Loom. So Loom, LOOM.com. You can do screen recordings. Like, you just have your little microphone. You can actually use Zoom. Since you have Zoom, there's a way to do it there too. But I just made a recording and I said, hi, this is, Jason, this is 4407 Yard Arm Court. I just want to walk you through it. Since you're not able to come to the house right now, I won't walk you through it. It's a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 4,000 square feet, like all the same things. But then I did like an overhead shot of Google Earth, so they can kind of see, hey, look, it's 5 minutes from the beach, 40 minutes from San Jose, and then went into Matterport and walked them through the few key pieces of the house. 2 bedrooms on this side of the house, 2 bedrooms on that side of the house. Here's a big kitchen. Look at the yard, and so it's the same way as if I had someone physically there with me walking them through that. I chose to do a recorded version, but if you did it on Facebook Live, people could then drop little comments and ask you questions along the way. So it's about as close to a real open house, I think, that you can do without being there. And
thank you.
In the future, I actually think this is probably going to stick around. What's that? Okay. I think this is something that might stick around because I can do a handful of these in a day versus one. I used to do 2 open houses in a day and it was miserable. Like dropping out all those signs and stuff like that. I didn't like doing it. So what if you did 2 of these virtual open houses on a Saturday and then 1 real open house on a Sunday when we're back to real normal, you know? And so it's, it's just a way that you can tour people through a house. So if you have listings and you're not using Matterport, I used to actually not love Matterport, but now it's basically essential. So
Matterport.
So when you watch that video of the link I just dropped, and it talks about Matterport, and it'll walk you through it.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to go make my 6 phone calls and figure out who wants to buy this house. So, cool.
Thank you, Jason. That was incredible.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you know what? I'll drop my email in here. If you ever need anything, feel free to email me. I'm also easy to find on Facebook. So, feel free to reach out. So like I said, I have more time than I normally do.